if you will now please welcome to the stage the host for this afternoon's event, the Speaker of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, Sharna Fernandez.
Good afternoon. Members of the Executive Council, representatives from the Consular Corps, members of Provincial Parliament, the Secretary of Provincial Parliament, representatives of the Cultural Commission, representatives of the United Nations, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It makes my heart so glad on a Saturday afternoon to see so many people in a room. And it really is a huge privilege and pleasure for me to welcome you today to what is going to be the first of many conversations that we will be hosting. I'm heartened. I see the Consul, I see the Consular Corps. It's so good to have you here. I know you've flown in all the way from Germany, Mr. Hansen. We also have guests who have flown in from Port Elizabeth, Pretoria and Gauteng, so do feel free, and thank you for making that sacrifice to be here with us today to start a conversation around integrity and ethical leadership. Before I proceed, though, I do need to tender the apology. You probably noticed the Premier and members of Cabinet and some members of Parliament are not in the room. They are actually all working across the province to take the centenary message of Nelson Mandela, Be the Legacy, to the furthest corners of our province today. So on behalf of the Premier, Cabinet and members, I do need to tender the apology, but I must acknowledge the presence of some of my colleagues in the room today who could be here. You might ask, where does integrity and ethical leadership fit in? And why are we hosting such a critical conversation today? Now, we're all aware that this year we celebrate the 100th anniversary of Nelson Mandela and Ma Albertina Sisulu. And as the legislative sector, there are all the parliaments around the country, as well as the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces, we agreed that we would run with the theme of Be the Legacy. And when I reflected on Mandela and Sisulu, I look at values and I look at, I think about integrity, I think about trust, I think about respect, and I thought what a better way to celebrate them was by hosting this dialogue. But then I thought, how do we start the conversation? And about 2 months ago, I was very privileged to attend what is a workshop, but it had the word integrity lapse in it. And I was fascinated. I thought, what constitutes an integrity lapse? You know, as far as I'm concerned, you either have integrity or you don't. And then suddenly the word integrity lapse popped up, and off I went, and I was very privileged. There was Prof. Madonsela, who is our guest today, as well as Charissa Bloomberg, she's a psychologist, and Faisal Dean. And I thought, here's an opportunity to do a package deal and try and secure their services for this very important conversation today. So Prof, Charissa and Faisal, thank you so much for agreeing to be part of what I believe is a critical conversation. And I believe that conversations can change the world, one person at a time, one conversation at a time, one room at a time. And when we see so many people in a room to talk about integrity on a Saturday afternoon, then I have hope for this country of ours. I do believe that it takes one person, 10 persons, 100 good people, and we can actually make that difference and be the difference that we would want to see in this country. So I would like to take this opportunity again to thank you. You are part of the centenary celebrations to honor Madiba, and this conversation will be one of many. I do hope by the time you leave here this afternoon, you'll go away saying, now that was worthwhile, a worthwhile 3 hours spent, and we are not here to listen, to respond. I believe we are here to listen, to understand, because too often the conversations are started with responses and not from a position of understanding. So I would like you to put your hands together for our panelists as we get started, and to say once again thank you to all of you for being here today. Thank you. I've got to go back up and do this again. Sorry, if I thought I was done, it is actually my duty to introduce our program director, Mr. Hadley Titus. Hadley, you might know, he's that voice on Fine Music Radio. He is one of the managers at the Artscape. And Hadley is also a philanthropist, but he's a no-nonsense kind of guy. He just gets on with life. So Hadley Titus will act as our program director today. Let's give it up for Hadley. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to this that word that's often used, auspicious occasion. And today is an occasion that is incredibly auspicious. But today we are not we don't belong to any political party today. We don't belong to any religious affiliation today. Today we are all people that are here to unpack, to demystify, to foster and promote that concept of integrity. We'll find out exactly what integrity is about. A gentleman once said, if I can find his little quotation here, he said that your personal integrity, once established and earned, people don't have to think about it. They know. They know you. They know you'll do the right thing every time. And that's going to be the message today, that integrity happens without anybody knowing every time. The speaker mentioned our panelists. I'm just briefly going to take the reason why these panelists are here. They've done amazing things throughout the world, so just bear with me. Professor Thuli Madonsela is a South African advocate and professor of law, holding a chair in social justice at Stellenbosch University since January 2018. She was one of 11 technical experts that assisted the Constitutional Assembly on drafting the Constitution. She is the co-architect of the Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act, also the Unemployment Equity Act and Local Government Transition Act. She has written extensively, published and provided training on various aspects of the law, equality and human rights in general. Then, radio and TV presenter Charissa Bloomberg is a renowned integrity leadership specialist. She's an emotional intelligence facilitator, and she's a media activist and the CEO of Hidden Dimensions, which is a corporate training and consulting company. She holds a master's in psychology, a psychodrama and group dynamics qualification from Oxford, and qualified as a drama and communication teacher. She has extensive international experience in motivational speaking, corporate consulting, coaching, mentoring, training, and facilitation relating to organizational behavior, leadership, and team analysis. And then the host of popular TV talk show, The Faisal Saeed Show. Faisal Saeed is the CEO of Dean Channel, StarSat broadcasting 24/7 into most of Africa. He's also the ambassador of the Sunflower Fund, which attends to the stem cell needs of children, mostly cancer sufferers. His social responsibility portfolio ranges from advocacy for animal rights to deaf persons, amongst others. And although he believes he is boring, he has a natural streak for comedic comments. And his beliefs are anti-social constructionist, and he believes that people should be just who they are. So that's our panel. Let's give a round of applause to them. They're going to be working very hard this afternoon. And I'd also like to just ask you to give a round of applause for the people who put this room together so beautifully. When we arrived the other day to look at the room, it looked like a room, but they've really done a good job of making this room look really, really, really nice. Ladies and gentlemen, Joyce Meyer once said that integrity means that you are the same in public as you are in private. And a person who really embodies that for me in a big way is our first speaker, and she is Charissa Bloomberg. Charissa Bloomberg is going to be talking to us about inspiring integrity for positive growth. Charissa.
Thank you, Hadley, for that warm introduction. Welcome, everyone. It's such a great honor to be here. I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to be here and joining us in these conversations, to all the dignitaries, to Parliament, to ministers, to colleagues and friends, to my colleagues who flew down from Johannesburg friend who took the bus from Pretoria, to Ravensteins who flew down with us yesterday. Thank you, everyone. But mostly, thank you to Speaker Sharna Fernandez. If it wasn't for you, we really wouldn't be here. And I really want to congratulate your team, and specifically a shout out to Colleen Ryan, who's been on those emails and back and forth and day and night. And you can email at 1 a.m. I don't know how she answers. So I applaud your amazing team. I want to give a special warm welcome to my colleague, my boss also, to Professor Advocate Thuli Madonsela. Thank you. We are so honored and blessed that you grace us with your presence. And especially since I know she has a hectic schedule. And when was it? It's a whirlwind. On Thursday night, Prof gave the most amazing speech. Some of you may have seen it. Was streamlined from Nelson Mandela University. Standing ovation. Blew the roof off. So amazing. I'll try not to steal some of your wonderful wisdoms that were said. And Faisal, thank you, from Dean Channel, and Hadley. So, thank you, everyone. Right, I'm talking to you about my absolute passion. So, someone needs to tell me when my time is up, because I could talk the whole time about integrity. And I want to start off by saying, do you know that integrity is the most misunderstood word? Everyone, in my research, everyone loves to throw the word around. We love to use it. Organizations love to say, well, it's part of our values. Have a look. We like to say that we do business with integrity. We like to call integrity leaders. But when we actually look down and ask them and say, what is it? People are not sure. So I just want to briefly say how I got started 3 years ago down this journey. I was working with a team in construction at a very high level. It was an ExCo team. We had their CEO, we had the MDs, and bearing in mind that this team looks after thousands and thousands of people. And I said, gentlemen, integrity is there on your wall. What does it mean? I don't know. And somebody said, doing the right thing. I said, okay. They asked me. I wasn't too clear either. Can you believe? And I call myself a professional. So we looked up, we did some research, and I said to the MD, you're all going on an integrity course. Me as well. And then we looked up and we researched one. There's only one course, but it's a very theoretical 4-day course. And it was not what I wanted. I wanted experiential, coming from that whole drama and experiential background. And I wanted to give a toolkit for integrity so we can pass some skills. So I wrote my own course and hence started my journey. But the more that I've been unpacking and the more people are asked what integrity is, we're just saying it's doing the right thing. But what is the right thing to do? Do we all know that? And that varies across all different cultures. What is the right thing for me may not be the right thing in other cultures. Then it varies from people to person, peoples to everybody who's looking at. Everyone has a different scale of integrity. I can think I'm on an integrity scale 8, and someone else can be on a scale of 2. So it differs, and hence it's a very complex scenario. I don't know what you want to call it. It is difficult to do, and if you want to try and train that and ask people and leadership to have integrity and ethics, it's complicated. Right, so when we go from there, I want to start talking about what happens, and Professor Madonsela coined this term, what happens when there's an integrity lapse in an organization. So the thing is, integrity costs us nothing, really, but when we lose it, we lose everything, and there is no going back. I won't go into detail. I think we all know what that means. When it's gone and the trust is broken, no matter how small that lapse is, it's gone, it's finished. And especially today, with our whole social media and being transparent, we just need someone to post something negative, and well, the rest is history. Because I don't know about anybody else. If I have to do business with an organization, we go and we look them up on the internet, and if anything's negative said about them, even to my nail tech, I won't go there. So we need to be very, very careful. I'm not going to talk about corruption. I'm going to talk about the smaller aspects of when we lose integrity and when we have an integrity lapse. But just to say a little bit more before I leave the topic of corruption, it's not only in South Africa, it's rife universally. Professor will say a lot more about this and her wonderful wisdoms when we talk about instant gratification. When you think that you can gain something immediately, but what it's going to cost you in the long run. is really not worth it. The sleepless nights, when's someone going to knock on your door? And then the shame and the horror if you get found out, what it does to your family, what it does to your friends, where we at. There is, as I've said, it's extremely damaging. So, I also want to say that I recently wrote an article, I was asked to write on Health 24, the psychological costs and symptoms of low integrity. What does that look like in organizations? So, it impacts people's health, it impacts their every single ability on every single level. Their well-being, their spirituality, and if you're a person with integrity working in an organization that doesn't have it, it's very unhealthy on all levels. But here's what happens when we're talking about behavior. We're talking about they will abuse company policy, there will be corridor talk, there will be gossiping, there will be no trust in your leaders, there will be the attitude, I'll do as little as possible to get by, there will be no teamwork. Extremely negative on all levels. I've worked, as I said, on construction sites, and I have seen when we have had our leaders and our MDs, and this is horrific because we're talking about integrity as part of being transparent, as part of being honest, as part of being open. And I've worked with MDs, and we've walked on site, and he'll say, hello, everyone, hello, hello. I thought we got rid of him. Didn't we fire him? I mean, that's fantastic integrity. There's no transparency. So, and when you have a leader with transparency, well, the whole world follows because you've known for that. But the downfall is, it is very, very hard work to work with integrity because every decision that you have has an impact on someone and something. And you have to continuously self-reflect in your own mind, if I do this, what will happen? If I say this, what will be the outcome of it? It's hard work, and that's why part of my training looks at a toolkit to self-reflect. It looks at introspection. And it starts with self-leadership. There is no integrity unless we look at ourselves and we say, where am I at? How am I being a role model for everybody else in my community? And if we can't, then we can't have it for others. We cannot pretend integrity. And we cannot turn it on for pretending that we have it at work, and then we're going home and, heaven forbid, having affairs, screaming and shouting, kicking the dog, doing other things. Integrity is a way of life that's in business, it's part of our communication, it's part of our parenting, it is in every aspect of our lives. So, and as I said, it's very, very hard work. So I wanted to talk a little bit. Last night I was up, wasn't too well. We had an amazing boat trip that didn't go too well, thanks to your home. So I was up in the middle of the night thinking, what a message I really want to get across. And the message I want to get across is doing the right thing, because that differs for everyone. And I had a little incident at the airport that I want to share, because otherwise this incident will have been for nothing. It nearly killed me. It's about doing the right thing. And here it never put to me, and it's about an integrity lapse, and it's never put to me more clearly than what happened. So I was flying out Thursday morning. I asked, I won't mention the name, I asked this cab to fetch me 6:30 a.m. To get to the airport, we were meeting Professor in Port Elizabeth, and I couldn't be late. 6:30, I'm outside ready and waiting. Where are you? I'm a few minutes away. Okay. 20 to 7, where are you? No, I'm no, because no da. 10 to, I phoned the control. Where is he? Oh no, he's stuck in traffic on Coburg Road. 5 to 7, where? He drives right past. I went mad. There is he driving past. Doesn't phone him, doesn't answer. He's gone. Comes back again the other way, drives right past. We are now 7:10. I managed to get in, and the flight, everything closes just before. That's not me. The flight's going to close in 5 minutes, and I'm in Milnerton. It's a 25-minute drive, and now there's traffic. So we all the time like this. We nearly have 5 accidents. We get there, and he says, that's 250 rand. Now, excuse me, what's the right thing to do? Do I pay someone, and I may not even make that flight? Do I decide all arrogant, I'm not paying you, you were late? And his excuse was, besides the line, his excuse was the GPS didn't talk to him. So as part of professionalism and as part of integrity, it's timekeeping. You plot your route beforehand, you know you're going to an airport. What's the right thing to do in my mind? So I said to him, sir, I need to run and catch this flight. If I get the flight, I will do an EFT. Well, as it happened, we had a little bit of a busy schedule in Port Elizabeth, as you know, and I didn't get to do it. I arrived at the airport, and I asked the manager to phone 3 times, which he didn't do from this cab, to ask him what's the right thing to do. I don't want to take the money away from this person who's also trying to make a living, but do I want to arrogantly teach them a lesson? You know, all these things are going through my mind, as millions of other things. I arrive, we get to the airport, and my new upgraded cab now is arriving for me. And he comes to arrest me and take my case away and march me off to the police station at the airport, caused a whole riot. Everyone's taking photos and said, this woman didn't pay me. And he grabbed my case out of my hand and took me to the police. Now, I need to be very careful since I'm keeping company with some very high-level people. I can't start screaming in public. I paid him, but it really was pretty hectic. So I'm asking now, what's the right thing to do? That was just a small little thing. On his side, it wasn't integrity. On my side, well, I raised my voice a little bit. Where are we with the right thing? And that got me to believe if we knew the right thing to do, we can teach others. We need to build integrity, resilience skills. In other words, we need to start talking about how can we be resilient when there's temptation. Temptation to scream, to shout, temptation for the ego to get in the way. What is the right thing to do, and how do we have integrity conscious skills, as Professor coined the term? And we can start, I know the educators in the room, we can start teaching the youth how to say no and how to have resilience when we want to have an integrity lapse, no matter how small, whether it's corrupt, whether it's stealing, whether it's shouting and screaming, what is the right thing to do? And I want to stay stuck with that, because if all of us worked a little bit on doing the right thing, we would not have murder, we would not have rape, we would not be abusing children, we would not be skinning animals alive and throwing them on fires. If everyone did the right thing, and maybe I'm being naive, but it's my belief, if everyone did the right thing and raised the bar a little bit, we'd have a better world to live in. So how do we get that message across? Because that is my passion, and it's a choice. Choice I want to put across. Maybe you can't train integrity, but you can inspire other people to do that. And you can inspire everyone to check with yourself first if you're doing the right thing. I want to share one more story. I was watching TV, if anyone's seen the program with Piers Morgan. He interviews women who are incarcerated in prison for life. And there was this just out of a teenager, I think she must have been 18 or 19 years, imprisoned for life for first-degree murder. No parole. And here's the strange thing. She wasn't there to witness the murder. She wasn't even there when they did the murder. So how did she get imprisoned for life? Please note, their policies are much stricter than ours. They get life for murder, and they weren't there. What was this scenario? It's fascinating. She lured in a 22-year-old man. They were doing drugs. Did anyone see that? She lured in this person knowing that they were just going to beat him up and steal the drugs. However, he put up a fight, so they shot him. So 4 lives are gone, and they're ruined. She's in prison for the rest of her life, no parole. The poor man of 22, got on the wrong side of drugs, is dead. And the 2 other who cahooted and beat him up and killed him, all lives are ruined. So how's that? She got for luring. She had a choice. She knew this man. She said, I didn't know he was going to be murdered. She had a choice. She could lure him in, and she could say, otherwise, please, don't go in there. And she still says, oh, he's a wonderful, young, good-looking man. There is a choice. There's a choice every single day of our lives to choose integrity or not, to choose doing the right thing or not. And if we can just be role models, and if we can be ambassadors for the rest of the world in our communities, and it starts with us. So I want to ask each and every one in this room, ask yourselves, and you don't have to answer me, what level of integrity do you think you are at? Are you a 2? Are you a 3? Are you a 10? Is there such a thing as being a 10? And here's the thing, when we lose it, and I have lost integrity lapses, I'm human, I am not perfect. The thing is, when we don't do something with integrity, we honestly need to forgive ourselves because we're human. We are not going to get it right all the time. But we have to make an effort. There's a dark cloud sitting on humanity. And there isn't a better time now with our centenary, with our 2 amazing leaders who are hosting with Professor here. There isn't a better time for us to start doing an introspection, for us to start having a different way of calling ourselves humanity, for us to start looking at integrity policies, for us to start looking at procedures, for us to start having pledges in organizations. I'm sounding like I'm preaching. For us to start just doing things differently. The time is now. We need to raise the bar on humanity because we've become not such a nice nation. There's a few good, amazing people who believe in integrity, but for the rest of humanity, it's time to raise the bar. And there's no, you know what? There is no reward for having integrity. There's an amazing following you may get in the end or you may not. No one's going to know. But the feel-good factor, there's nothing, unless you're a psychopath and a real murderer, the feel-good factor when you do something right, no one can take that away from you. That is self-esteem. You feel good. You feel amazing. You've done the right thing. And you've avoided temptation. And it's priceless. And it's time that we have a lot more feel-goods in our community and in the world. So before I continue to carry on sounding like I'm preaching, that I've got 10 more minutes. Am I allowed to have questions then? Not really, no. I can't change the format. So I would love some questions though, because I love to interact. So I'm asking you, if there's anyone who wants to be involved with us looking at policies and procedures and how we can do this, I'm open at the end when we have our panel to start looking at ideas how we can bring this back, how we can inspire integrity leadership, how we can look at new ways of doing business. What can we do and where does it start? I want people to start asking the questions, and I want to start with the youth. I want to thank someone, I get it wrong, Commander Glenn, he's going to kill me, Madonsela, my colleague, and his 2 cadets sitting with him. Glenn I've known from UCT many years ago. He's doing some amazing work at UCT in student housing, and he's invited me to talk to all the housing staff, which we did. And we spoke to the young cadets sitting next to him, looking very smart there. These youths were taken off the street. They're disadvantaged youth. They've been taken away from getting involved with drugs and gangs, and they become young sea cadets. And Glenn said, just come speak to 100 of them. And we spoke to them. Do you know, and they can speak for themselves at the back there, they grabbed it. They loved it. We've got a video filming of them. They did in the end, integrity, integrity, integrity. Remember that wonderful, powerful? These cadets just embraced it. They knew that. The students who we asked to brainstorm, I asked them a few questions. What is integrity? Tell us of a time when you haven't had integrity. Ask a few questions. Oh my gosh, these youths and these students could teach me things I didn't know about integrity, and I've been researching it for 3 years. So what I'm saying is people are grabbing this, people are ready for it, our youth is ready for it. The time is now. So please join with me, please let's just continue this dialogue. It is my passion, it's my dream. I haven't spoken about ethics, I'll leave that to Honourable Professor Thuli Madonsela. Please join me in causing a ripple effect. And apologies if I'm preaching, but I am adamant that I'm sacrificing everything to get integrity and social justice. I'll leave that to Professor to speak about. The time is now, because if not now, when? Thank you. Thank you, everyone. No, it's a bit of a preaching. Thank you.
Thanks for that very passionate and inspirational speech, Charissa. Let's give her another round of applause. Very, very passionate. One of the things she said was that integrity is very hard. So just remember, according to H. Jackson Brown, he said that, remember, what's right isn't always popular, and what's popular isn't always right. Martin Luther King put it more succinctly when he said the time is always right to do what is right. So just remember that the time is always right to do what is right. There's a wonderful saying that's going around, and it's a saying that we can all embrace, which says, real integrity is doing the right thing, knowing that nobody's going to know whether you did it or not. So don't do it when somebody notices, just do it because it is the right thing. Clement Stone said, have the courage to say no. No, I'm not doing that. Have the courage to face the truth. Do the right thing because it is right. There are, and these, he says, are the magic keys to living your life with integrity. And integrity also means that you are the same in public as you are in private. One of my favorite poets and people who has a lot to say about integrity is Zig Ziglar. He said, "It is true that integrity alone won't make you a leader, but without integrity, you will never be one." So that's a lot to think about. And he also said that honesty and integrity are absolutely essential to success in life, all areas of life. The really good news is that anyone can develop both honesty and integrity. And a person that we've come to know that's really engendered and fostered honesty, integrity, and leadership in us and in great parts of the world is Professor Thuli Madonsela, and I'd like to welcome her on stage now.
Thank you for that very kind introduction, dear colleague Hadley. And thank you to our Speaker of the Western Cape Provincial Legislature for the privilege to come together to talk about integrity and also to celebrate two great South Africans, Nelson Mandela and Mama Albertina Sisulu. Thank you to everyone who has contributed to bringing us here. And greetings to honored guests among us this morning. Nelson Mandela and Mama Albertina Sisulu are two human beings that never set out to be great human beings. Today we celebrate them as icons of integrity and ethical conduct at a time when we need these two most. There's so much fracture in the world. There's so much injustice in the world. And a lot of the fracture and injustice comes from the deeds of people who claim to be just, who claim to be honest, who claim to do the right thing, but they do the wrong thing. And in the end, we've become a very divided world and a very painful world. These two are part of a generation that, according to President Thabo Mbeki, put this country on the pedestal of hope, having clutched us from the brink of the abyss. But they never ever said they were people of integrity. Integrity is a verb, just like love. When a person says, "I love you," but they beat you, as it happens in violent domestic relationships, they don't love you, otherwise they wouldn't beat you up. The same thing with integrity. They say it's like being a lady. When you say you have it, you probably aren't a lady. Well, they say when you say you're a lady, you probably aren't a lady. If we say integrity is a verb, in other words, it's action, we know a person has integrity because of what they do. What is integrity? My colleague, Charissa Bloomberg, has given us a sense of what integrity is. If you check a dictionary, you'll find various descriptions of integrity. You'll find key words that go with integrity would be honesty, reliability, purity of thought, fairness, etc., trustworthy, etc. I wrote a book in 2001 on gender management and leadership, and identified integrity as one of the key things that are needed for a leader to be able to inspire and influence people to think and behave in a particular way. And I mentioned several names in respect of each leadership characteristics. And I said, Mama Albertina Sisulu exuded integrity. It's quite interesting that today when a speaker, Shanaz, wanted to bring us here, she thought that when we celebrate people of integrity, one of the people we have to celebrate is Mama Albertina Sisulu. I think the big thing about it also is, as my colleague Charissa said, it can be integrity when it looks like integrity, but when we dig deeper, we find something else. I used to say to my team at the Public Protector South Africa, brand integrity is important. As a public protector team, we had this inflated brand. You know, the world thought so highly of us. My greatest fear as a leader of that team, or the top leader of that team, was if somebody punches a little bit and it all blows out like air in a balloon. So it was always important that we design systems, we inculcate behaviors that make sure that what people see on the outside is what is on the inside, and what people think the public protector is becomes the experience, regardless of which of our 22 offices they go to. And I believe with Mama Nelson Mandela, Mama Albertina Sisulu, and Tata Nelson Mandela, we got that. You got the same view of them, whether you read about them or you met them in person. So how do we sport integrity then? If we say it's a verb and we have to sport it through what people do, how do you sport integrity? Do you have any ideas? I've looked at basically the things that Nelson Mandela is associated with. And I thought in this particular case, we should focus on his role on social justice. I believe that Mandela went to jail because he fought for social justice, which was a world where everyone is treated fairly and justly, a world where societal opportunities are distributed evenly, and the child of a farm worker is not trapped into the status of a farm worker for life. The child of a domestic worker is not trapped into that status for life. But also, he believed in treating everyone fairly, regardless of their status in life. And I remember when we were doing stakeholder consultations here in the Western Cape, Minister Mayer, who was Minister of Health in this province at the time, said one of the things that really annoy him is that we treat poor people poorly. Obviously, something like that would have no integrity, because if you believe in social justice, if you believe in justice, then you can't treat other people fairly and you treat other people unfairly. That's part of integrity, is there has to be resonance between your pronouncements and the things you do on a day-to-day basis. This is what I discovered. Firstly, I've been doing a study of leadership among women pioneers for about 30 years, and that's how I came up with the idea that Mama Albertina Sisulu exuded integrity. Today, though, I'm going to deviate from Mama Albertina Sisulu and the women leaders who've paved the way and focus on Tata Mandela. The first thing about integrity and ethical conduct comes to the company you keep. If you don't keep the right company, two things happen. One is there's no integrity in keeping a wrong company when you say you stand for something else. For example, if I say I'm against corruption, but the people who hang at my house are corrupt people all the time. The people, if for example, I want to run a campaign for office, the people who run a campaign for me are corrupt people. There's lack of integrity there. Why is there lack of integrity? Because if integrity, when we talk about research integrity, for example, we're saying the research is whole, is untainted. Now, if I say I'm a person of integrity, or at least if I say I'm ethical, I'm against corruption, and then I'm having people who are corrupt campaigning for me, the message I am communicating to the people is, these are upright citizens. These are people who should be trusted. So there's no integrity in that. Nelson Mandela kept the right company, and he did not legitimize people who were corrupt. What about the things he did? I believe that there was resonance between what he said he stood for and what he did. And one of the things he stood for, from the time when he was just a lawyer and a struggle activist, was social justice. And I can say that during his presidency, he was about treating everyone fairly, regardless of what that person was. Most of the times we were concerned about treating poor people well. Okay, as I spoke about Minister Mayor being worried about treating poor people poorly, and we think that's wrong. But should we treat rich people poorly? Should we? No. When we have integrity, we have to stick to our word. Because if you said you are about fairness, then you have to be fair to every human being. And that was one of the things that he did, was there was resonance between the things he did and the things he said. And one of the anecdotes I have about former President Nelson Mandela is an anecdote where under Minister Dalla Oma, we did not meet a deadline. He's always said that when people are in authority, they demand mercy for themselves. But when they deal with their underlings, they're not even prepared to dispense justice. They're just ruthless, especially when the stakes are high. And we had a case where we were supposed to deliver the National Action Plan on Human Rights, and it had to be delivered by a particular time because that was a UN commitment. And came the day when we had to deliver the National Action Plan on Human Rights, and President Nelson Mandela had to come and talk and sign it, and there was no National Action Plan on Human Rights. There was a skeleton. Now, we had a good explanation because it was a public consultative process. But for me, I will never forget the graciousness with which he accepted that. Other people will throw a tantrum, even if they don't throw it in public, but they'll throw it in the back room, without even listening to what are the constraints within which you had to work in. But the other thing that I liked about him when it comes to leadership and integrity was Nelson Mandela was a lawyer, but he understood that he had limitations about understanding all areas of the law, and he therefore allowed his ministers to be ministers. And sometimes we can be leaders and have people that work for us, but we treat everyone as a follower. If you read the book, for example, Jesus CEO, it's not about Jesus, as the Son of God. It's about Jesus, the manager. It's written by Laurie Beth Jones. He gives you an example of a good leader has disciples before followers, which means you work with a collective and you respect the ability of the other people to move the needle forward. And Nelson Mandela, in this particular case, deferred to people like Dalla Oma when it came to the National Action Plan on Human Rights, the TRC process, and the drafting of certain laws, including the Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act. So that's Is the company he kept the right company. It doesn't mean he didn't talk to everyone. I mean, if we all know that Madiba respected everyone from cleaner to president, to fellow president. But I'm talking about who becomes his inner circle, who gets his ear. Is it upright people or delinquent people? Because we eventually become like the company we keep. Harvard has done numerous studies that show that it's not, people don't just poison the character of 5-year-olds. Grown up as we are, we eventually become similar to the people we talk to every day. Because when we do wrong things, they tell us we're doing right things. When we are an emperor who's walking butt naked, they say, "My lord, you have the most beautiful dress in the world, the most beautiful garment in the world." And then you walk around, with a very big head, thinking you're wearing the most glamorous garment in the world, whereas actually you are naked. But depends on who are you keeping around yourself. The way he talked. So it's the company he kept, the things he did, and the things he didn't do, the company he kept. And then the way he talked to people. One of the examples I have about how he talked was how he took responsibility. Integrity requires that you do the best you can. And as Charissa said, it doesn't mean that when you make mistakes, you are not a person of integrity. You're not a person of integrity when you make mistakes, and having made a mistake, you lie about the mistake. But for me, it's not even just lying about the mistake that I find appalling. It's when you lie and throw someone else under the bus for it. Recently, I have a lovely PA, and she's a teacher. She's not a PA. She's a teacher. She was brought in whilst we were trying to look for a PA, and I had to go to Rwanda recently, and they have these flights that leave at 2 a.m. at night. Who leaves at 2 a.m. at night? Okay, so everyone read the flight. Well, I didn't look at the ticket. So that's number one. Everyone is supposed to look at the ticket, but I didn't. She looked at the ticket, and somehow she concluded that it's 2 in the afternoon, the following day. So anyway, because of that, then I agreed to address an event in Joburg, and I went to address the event in Joburg. I can't remember whether it was the Salga event or some other important event. And then when I just finished the one event and I'm readying myself to go to the airport, oh no, we're meeting Standard Bank on the issue of bonds, this selling of houses without reserve. So we had a fantastic meeting with the leadership of Standard Bank, and now I'm rushing to the airport, and I see a note that says, "Sorry, you're not going to the airport. We misread, or I misread the flight ticket. You actually have to now get another flight tomorrow at 2 a.m. And I was told later that she was totally traumatized by this. When I just said to her, I said, "Oh, thank you for your honesty," because often people just, they tell stories, and it's just so frustrating. But the worst part is when they blame someone else for what they. And she just was very honest and said, "I misread the ticket, and I'm now sorting out another one." And for me, that was the end of the story. I will always remember that, and it's a story I would like to tell people, particularly young people, that when you lie, actually you pay tomorrow. And there's a famous story that I tell about myself when I was consulting. There's something similar to the story that Charissa told. When I was consulting with the Department of Transport in the Northwest, there was this event where we were running this workshop on a public holiday, and banks were closed, but we didn't know that, and we were late. So when people are late, people tend to say, "I'm around the corner." I never say that anymore after that day. I said to them, we had passed Swatrachens or some place there, we said we had passed that place. But I used to drive a little bit, not as good as I would like people to drive these days, and people should drive properly and not exceed the speed limit. So what happened to us is we reached a toll gate. Normally toll gates are 5 rand, 6 rand, 7 rand something. This toll gate was, I think, 40 something or 56 rand. There was 2 of us, me and Molly. Molly had no money in her pocket. I had no money in her pocket. These are the days when you still carry checkbooks. So all we had was checkbooks. There was no transferring of money, through cell phone banking or anything like that. That we were stuck. And these guys, we asked them, can we pay by check? No. And then they said we must go to the nearest town to find a bank. We went to the nearest town to find a bank. It's closed. It's a public holiday. We go into the ATM, it's broken. That's what always happens on public holidays. Banks end up being out of order. So it was the only bank, it was the only ATM. In the meantime, they happened to be the Department of Transport, and they happened to control traffic officers. So they've been asking, shouldn't we send the traffic officers to come and escort you? Now, if you have lied about where you are, you're not going to allow people to come and pick you up, because you're still thinking you're going to cover ground. But it's becoming desperate, guys. I never wish that feeling on any human being. The feeling we're at. Okay, Molly was my assistant, and she was my colleague. But I think the burden was on me. I have lied, and now I'm paying for lying. It's the whole thing of pay now, pay later. So I had chosen to pay later by lying about. If I had just said, sorry, this is where we are, we had difficulties, problem solved, you feel unpleasant about it, they hate you, but problem solved. Now you want them to like you on the basis of lies. And then the lie just kept becoming unmanageable. But to cut the long story short, we eventually went back to the toll gate and told them about what happened, that we can't find a bank. And one of those guys trusted us, and we were able to give him a check and just double the amount and say, and he had to just trust us. I wasn't the pop protector then. I wasn't a brand or anything like that. He just had to trust us that we were the right kind of human beings. And if he had known that we had lied to the Department of Transport, though, he would not have given us his money. Because that's it, isn't it? We don't trust people who are not trustworthy to other people. You think if they can lie to him, they can lie to me as well. So that's basically just talking about what you do. And Madiba, for him, there was always resonance between what he promised and what he delivered. And in regard to the Equality Act and the National Action Plan on Human Rights, he didn't, when he went public, say, oh, we don't have the National Action Plan on Human Rights on time because Dala Omar has failed to deliver on time, and because Dala Omar's team has failed to deliver on time. He was team leader. He was team captain of South Africa. He just apologized to the public for the date on which the National Action Plan on Human Rights was supposed to be delivered, and promised another thing. The other thing that he did, though, when it came to unkept promises, I've spoken about the National Action Plan on Human Rights. The other act that just kept not coming on time was the Equality Act. If you read Nelson Mandela's speech, you will find deadlines being stretched. Again, what I liked with him, he didn't then drop it off the radar, because other people do that. You make a promise and then you hope they've forgotten that I had promised this, and then you say, if they don't mention it, I'm not going to mention it. Do you know people like that? If somebody owes you money, and then just they count on you, if you don't ask for it back, you're not going to get it. That's lacking in integrity. Madiba kept mentioning that Equality Act. I'm mentioning the Equality Act because now, 19 years since that act was passed, part of it is still not implemented, and nobody mentions it. And the presumption is that if we don't mention it, nobody is going to exact accountability, isn't it? If we keep it in the public psyche, we're then encouraging people to exercise social accountability and to push for its implementation and to push for progress against all of those areas of transformation that it was supposed to cover. It was supposed to cover beyond employment, because if you look at the legacy of apartheid in terms of social justice, it didn't just cover employment. I see everyone in this room is too young, or a majority of people in this room are too young to know what happened under apartheid. But generally under apartheid, people were excluded from buying land, for example, or buying immovable property, until around 1990, when they were given the 99-year lease and then later then allowed to buy property. So obviously there would be a backlog between races when it comes to land. But more importantly, 1913 Land Act, we know that people were totally removed from certain areas and scooped up out of areas that were not arid, and they were put into areas that were arid. I mean, even rivers were scooped out of the so-called homelands, and people were left with very small patches of land. So that's the land question, that's the property sector. But if you look at inequality, you would also find inequality in the home. As a result of the patriarchal provisions that were there. And for example, when it comes to the Black Administration Act, women were not allowed to own property. The impact of that in rural areas is that family patches would have been transferred to sons, and therefore women would not own land if you're looking at land. Schools, when I was a researcher and part-time lecturer at Wits, we spoke about expenditure per child being, for every 4 rand spent on a white child, government was spending only 1 rand on a black child. So obviously if you were going to come back with now moving forward, you would have had to assess what was the impact of that on infrastructure in historically black schools, and what were you going to do? So the Equality Act allowed people to do audits on their own, and then on their own move forward to make sure that everything was done. Now, we haven't mentioned it, and for me, that's an area that I think if President Mandela had continued to be among us, he would have continued to talk about it, even if it was unpleasant to talk about that. Why do I say that? One of the things about integrity is when you know better, you do better. Nelson Mandela at some stage believed that law could liberate people. That's why he became a lawyer. But I mean, despite the fact that at Wits they failed him, well, that's what he claims, I don't know. All students claim to have been failed, but he said they failed him because of racism. You know, he didn't finish his degree at Wits eventually. But he still believed in law, and when he went to prison, he continued to study law, and we know that he continued to believe that law could liberate people. But when they banned the ANC after Sharpeville, when they banned the ANC, banned PAC and all of the liberation movements, there was no room for talk. And President Mandela believed the answer now lay in armed struggle. But once he was in prison and there was room again to talk, negotiations started, he started believing that there's room for talk, and he advocated dialogue as a way of moving forward. And that's part of integrity, is when you know better, you do better. And there should always be resonance between what you know to be right and what you do. I think what is wrong is when we know the difference between right and wrong, but for convenience, we choose to do what is wrong. And linked to the way he talked, dear colleagues, I would like to also add that he took responsibility. He didn't play the victim to say, I promised this, but because of apartheid, I have not delivered. He always said, we need to do more on poverty, we need to do more on equality, we need to do more on safety for everyone. Yes, we inherited a system, but he took responsibility for what needed to be done. Steadfast. Nelson Mandela remained steadfast in the face of adversity. We do know that in the Rivonia trial, he stood steadfast in terms of his belief on justice for all. And when he was president, there were those that felt that he should be harsh on those who benefited under apartheid and soft on those who were victims of apartheid. His approach was justice has no color. And some people didn't like him. And because of that, some people are contesting his legacy today. His approach was, we're building a fair world. We're building a united nation. All of our actions should have resonance with that. We can't sometimes have resonance, and sometimes when it suits us, divide and rule. And he never used a divide and rule strategy. His legacy, when we look back now, I would say former President Nelson Mandela would be one of those people who probably would be happy that we're applauding him. Because integrity requires that when people applaud, you feel the applause within as well. You don't feel, who are they talking about? Because when you look in the mirror, you know that they're seeing something else other than who you really are. And I do believe that. And because of that, I think he left an epic legacy. He came to be known as a leader beyond the title he held. Because Nelson Mandela was never appointed as a global leader. But because of him doing his job with integrity, the world regarded him as a global leader. Why was he able to do his job with integrity? Well, firstly, I did say that we get to know that a person acts with integrity when we see their actions. But what is one word that summarizes a person with integrity? I would say it's ethical conduct. Between me and Charissa, using a pun against her company, we say that integrity is the hidden dimension beneath ethical conduct. If you have no integrity inside you, you're not going to consistently act ethically, which is do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Take principled decisions, take principled actions, regardless of who you are dealing with. Be happy to be transparent. Just going back to the need for transparency as part of strengthening integrity, but also as a sign of ethical conduct. When I was public protector, there was a staff member who was not performing. It was dismal. Nobody likes firing a person. And in this particular case, we really had to let her go. But what she did was, there was a whole lot of lapses in terms of some of the work that were done. And it already was there in Parliament, you know, some of the way we had appointed consultants, that what I had asked to be done as a team, let me just say as a team, we hadn't done things exactly the way we were supposed to have done that. But we already knew that it had already been audited, and this was now being held against us by this colleague. And, you know, at some stage I wrote and said, let's do this as a public hearing. when she was threatening me through letters, through lawyers, and I said, I'm fine. For me, I am not going to be held at ransom. The best way to resolve this thing was, let's go and have a public hearing. If the public thinks I've done something wrong, I'm happy to go through that. Well, she eventually settled because I got a sense that she knew what was going to come out what was going to come out on our side was what was already in the public domain. But when it came to her performance, it would have been clear what the problem was. For Madiba, one of the things that he did very well was transparency. And that's why he was part of the leadership that built an architecture of our democracy that emphasizes open governance and transparency, because they say sunshine is the best disinfectant. And if we have nothing to hide, there should be no problem with going public. And in my case, I really had no problem going public. But I think in the Department of Transport case, if that one had gone public, I really would have had problems. But I learned my lesson. And to date, I honestly, when I'm late, I just say, I'm sorry I'm late. I don't lie and say, I'm this way, I'm far away, I'm 2 minutes away. I just say, if we're leaving the house, with my protectors, we always say, we're now leaving the house. So what allows you to do that? What allows you to have integrity? The first thing is really your belief system. What are your values? What do you believe in? The second thing that allows you to have integrity is self-leadership, which Charissa mentioned, is you can't lead other people if you can't lead yourself. And sometimes the little person in you wants to do what's easy and what's going to give you quick rewards. And the big person in you says the integrity path is going to be tough and the cost is going to be immediate. And you have to choose between that, between the integrity voice in you and the expediency voice. And people like Madiba choose the integrity voice. The company you keep is important in terms of integrity. And lastly, what are the fault lines when it comes to integrity and unethical conduct? I would say one of them is a conflict of interest. In many of the cases that we investigated as a pub protector, we found that when there's a conflict of interest between what will enrich you and what you are required to do in your position, and if you don't manage that conflict of interest, you get an integrity lapse. You will see that in some of the reports that I did against the rules in SAPS. Yes, we made mistakes in Midville, Nkandla, which many people know about, the state capture report, etc. A lot of it has to do with an inability to manage conflict of interest. And sometimes conflict of interest, though, is not clear. It's not just you're going to benefit money. Conflict of interest sometimes is there's a friend involved. And I can go through cases where I personally grieved in the cases that I investigated. The IEC case, I grieved. And at some stage, my team kept me in that room until 7 a.m., insisting that the facts are pointing in different direction than the way I want to go. But you have to accept that it's going to be said, these people are people you like. Nkandla, the same. I had a very good relationship with President Zuma. He had been very kind to me, and we still had to go with what the facts had to say. So you've got to understand, though, when there's a conflict of interest and accept that and manage that conflict of interest. If need be, extricate yourself from a situation where, and sometimes a conflict of interest might be that you're going to benefit, that if this person moves out, you're going to get their job. And think about it, because you will find yourself making unconscious decisions that violate integrity unintentionally. So, but just pulling everything back together, dear colleagues, in the centenary of Nelson Mandela and Mama Albertina Sisulu, what does it mean to you? What does it mean to me? And what does it mean to us? My sense of it is Nelson Mandela climbed a mountain, as he said, and he said when you climb a hill, you reach the top, and find that there are many more hills to climb until you die. And he kept climbing those hills and doing his best. It is now our time to climb those hills with integrity. And what is our Bible for integrity? I would say it is our Constitution. Our Constitution is very clear that we're building a society that is based on equality for all, human dignity for all, social justice, and more importantly, we're building a society where everyone's potential is freed and everyone's life is improved. We're building a society based on honesty, justice, and truth. So the challenge is to make sure that all of our decisions are aligned with the vision of society that we're building. The challenge we also have is to make sure that we also encourage those we work with to buy into the vision of society and to act in accordance with that vision. There are no other liberators for our country and our continent. We have already been given freedom. We all have political freedom. Might not be complete because democracy is not a perfect system, but we all have political freedom. We all have legal freedom. We all have a certain level of psychological freedom. We can leverage those freedoms to ensure that we push the frontiers of freedom for all in the areas of the economy and social advancement. Because if we don't do that, if democracy doesn't work for all, the pedestal of hope that we are on might just disappear. But I know it will not, because we are here to connect our lights, and we will continue to do so. Thank you.
So, and I'm going to be firing some questions at the panel. So I'm going to be starting with Charissa. Now, we've been chatting about integrity as a big thing. So, big question, Charissa. Could you very, very short, succinctly define integrity? I know it's difficult, but what's your definition of integrity?
Okay, I think Prof spoke about that earlier. It's about being honest, it's about being transparent, it's about speaking your truth. And for me, that's huge, because the older I'm getting, the more direct and honest I'm becoming about speaking the truth rather than holding it in. So, and it's about self-reflection, and it's about self-leadership, and it's about saying what you said you're going to do, you're going to do. End of the story.
Like your taxi driver.
Like the taxi driver being on time. But if you say you're going to email at the end of the day, sometimes I have integrity lapses when I'm supposed to email at the end of the day. When you say you're going to do something, do that.
Right, and Faisal, why do you think integrity and ethics is so needed in organizations today?
Yeah, I think that, everyone asks that question, and I think that it's something that has become somewhat of a cliche, but it really is not. It is important because we need to look at how that translates into actual outcome. So just very quickly, I just want to touch quickly on one aspect, and that is looking at the actual definition of integrity being the quality of being honest. So you have the quality of being honest as integrity, and then ethics being the adherence to the guidebook or the rule of books or your legislation or your company policy. So how does the two translate and link to each other? If you don't have visceral integrity, you're not going to stick to the ethics of your organization. And if you don't stick to the ethics of your organization, you might simply be fired. So it translates into success. So sticking to the rule books through integrity leads to success.
Good answer. Prof, I'm going to come to you now. Shem, I know you've had a long session here, but it seems to me that there's so many integrity lapses these days. Why do you think that is? It seems to be so prevalent wherever you go. People are lapsing with their integrity values.
Right, yes. Well, I would say let's firstly look at some of the key integrity lapses that we have seen recently. ESCOM, it's a long story, eh? Yes. Trillion, long story. SABC, Steinhoff, KPMG, SAP. So many companies that we held in high esteem have fallen in terms of the level of trust we're prepared to give them. How does it happen? I would say, let's divide between integrity lapses by an organization and integrity lapses by a person. At the level of a personal integrity lapse, it all boils down, in terms of my research, to pay now or pay later. People tend to go for an integrity lapse because we fear paying now. We want to stay in our company zone. Let's go back to the story I told you about me. The integrity lapse there was, I would rather lie than just be honest and say, I'm late. Which means feel sorry and feel bad now, and they don't like you now, but you haven't lied. Mm-hmm. We lie to hide our mistakes. You've dropped a ball, you lie. But sometimes, just talking about integrity being about honesty, sometimes it is about, I want to be liked. So it's again about paying now. I want to be liked. My colleague who is in charge of me, who can make my life miserable, wants me to do something wrong. Like to employ her cousin. And then I employ the cousin because I want to stay in good books with my immediate supervisor, because I don't want an unpleasant environment. But I'll pay later, isn't it? Because when it's discovered that I did that, I might just be the one who gets fired. And in any event, even if I don't get fired, I could pay by feeling sad about the fact that I've become a crook. And I participated in issuing that tender. And then the pay now and pay later also applies when it comes to people running out of money. When I was a single mother, I was asked at some stage if I would make myself available for the position of a DDG. At the stage, I wasn't even chief director. I was a deputy director in government, and here's an offer to be DDG, and I had just bought a house. And that was really, really tough. So when they asked me if I would be DDG, I said, no, I should put my CV, and the reason they wanted me was they didn't like the woman, the only woman who had applied. They needed a woman to be appointed, so it would have been a showcase for me because they needed a woman, and the applications had closed, and the only woman who had applied, they didn't like because they said she was difficult to work with. So of course I was going to be involved in two integrity lapses. One is get into a position in order to boot someone out, you know, the Mordecai situation. Yeah. But the second thing that I was going to do was I was going to put my CV after the deadline had gone, which meant these people were always going to be the ventriloquists behind me in terms of whatever I was going to do from that job. And I said no, but from a need point of view, I needed the money. So, but I said no. But can you imagine when people were looking for skeletons in my closet? They wouldn't have had to invent, you know, those spy stories, those silly spy stories. They would have found the skeleton. But it's need to create. From companies, where is the need? It's often when it comes to tenders, for example, from the World Economic Forum and in Transparency International conferences, companies always say that it's difficult when everyone does it. when it's very clear that if you don't put anything on the table, you're not going to get the deal, regardless of you being the best. So a lot of companies say they do it because of that. But again, it's pay now, it's pay later, because when it's discovered, look at big companies that didn't have to get involved in corruption, and they got involved, and I suspect it's because they felt that if you go the normal route, you're not going to get anything. So that's the problem. It's just need to greed. Why do I say it's need to greed? Is that at the start, it's usually there's some reason why you need to deviate from an upright path, from an honesty path. But once you get involved in it, it becomes a way of life. Sometimes you have now to lie to cover the original lie. And sometimes you can get involved in integrity lapses in terms of now trying to get rid of the people who know you did something wrong, and you push them out of their jobs, as happened at ESCOM and many other organizations that were investigated. Yes.
So just to put it as my friend Zig Ziglar would have said, integrity, in your case where you practice your integrity, it gives you real freedom because you have nothing to fear since you have nothing to hide.
Exactly.
Charissa, is there a relationship between ethics and integrity?
Absolutely, but I'd like to just go back a bit. Just
Sure.
as Prof was speaking, I was reminded people recover far quickly from honesty than they do about the lies.
Yeah.
So we must just remember that. And it's about taking accountability. To be honest, I messed up. I am so sorry. How do I make it right? So yes, integrity and ethics are absolutely interconnected. And in my research found everyone is talking about ethics and they're spending a little bit of time on integrity. So ethics for me can also be saying your ethical way of doing business, your ethics, and I love to give this example. Your ethics is your code of conduct as well. So as a psychologist, I'm not supposed to sleep with my patients. But here comes this sexy man, potential future husband, you know, maybe it's nice, but only it will be my integrity that will stop me. So the ethics mean nothing unless I have the integrity. So ethics we can enforce, correct me if I'm wrong, and integrity you can't, you can just hope for.
Good answer, good answer. Slightly more difficult one now I'm going to field this one to Faisal and to Charissa. Does integrity have the same meaning across all cultures?
I think you guys asked me this question because I traveled so much this year. So I've been out of the country a few times this year. I just got back from Tanzania. And it's a very interesting question because I think it's about interpretation, in my view. So this is what I've experienced. But before I get to the actual answer, I just want to summarize two things. The word meaning what is intended. So the definition is what's intended. And the definition of culture being the ideas, customs, and notions that a society defines itself by. So I think now that you understand meaning and cultures, we understand what's happening there. Firstly, by the nature of the word culture, I think we must understand there will be differences. That's why it's a culture, because you're defining a people and a society, for example. So that defines a culture. So there will be differences. But I've got a theory of my own, Hadley, and that's what I want to place down here. I've spoken about it in the last session. And that was, I felt that this answer lays on a spectrum and a continuum. So that means in between you might have a climaxal area of commonality, in my view, but there will be peripheral differences. For example, I met Star Times Beijing last week. When they give you the business card, for example, like I told you, Adley, it's with two ends. And so if you meet any Chinese person, know that you need to give the business card with two hands, not one hand, because they'll take offense to that. We on our side, I would just say, I'll just send you my contact details. But be that as it may. So you see there's a slight difference in that we were in Dubai and our technical director Ahmed is there. The funny thing about Dubai was that here in South Africa, we can jaywalk, we can cross the road like we want to, when we want to, even walk in front of cars and not think anything about it. If you've been to Durban recently, it's even worse. But, I mean, okay, Cape Town's a different country, Madam Speaker. But the thing is that in Dubai, nobody's looking. Charissa, you said it's when nobody's looking. We stood at the robot with 50 people no cars in the road. The pedestrian robot said you cannot cross, and nobody crossed. It would have only been us South Africans crossing if that was going to happen. But the point is, nobody was looking. There was no law enforcement around, but people observed the rules. So I think that culture, there are slight differences on the end, but if you look at the center, the climax area, is it right in any culture to rape anybody? Cannot be. So I think that there's a commonality and a difference on the side.
Okay. Charissa, would you like to weigh in on that one?
Yes, well said. For me, I'm two schools of thought. Every culture does have a different way of doing things, and there's a right way and a wrong way. And we can't criticize a culture. In their culture, I won't go into examples. But here's the thing. If integrity is about honesty and transparency, can we say, well, in my culture, we're just a little less honest? No. So the broad aspects about speaking your truth, being transparent, being honest, needs to be universal.
And I think that's the key word, that it's a universal thing.
Yes.
It comes from within. It really comes from within. Prof, you spoke about companies like Steinhoff and all those other companies that have fallen by the wayside because of their way of doing business. So is there value in doing business with integrity, and how would that impact on profitability?
There certainly is value in doing business with honesty and integrity. Many businesses have now discovered that, and they've come together under something called the UN Global Compact. And some of them also have the same view under the World Economic Forum, that clean business is good business. The truth is, lack of integrity pays, but it pays in the short term. For example, you're not going to lie to a young person and say paying a bribe is not going to make their company become profitable overnight, because it will. If you get involved in scheming, if, for example, your bread is supposed to be 1 kg and you only a package bag your bread at 800 grams, as once happened, it's going to pay, because it means with the 20% that you are stealing from every customer, you can sell more bread and you make a lot of money. But the reality is, when the truth hits home, you lose everything. You lose more than what you gained by acting unethically. When you lose trust. When we started this conversation, we said the world is fractured and there's so much trust deficit. We don't trust government, or a lot of people don't trust government, a lot of people don't trust businesses. It has a lot to do with all of the ones that have cheated. Not everyone is cheated, but because of the ones that have cheated, people start thinking people cheat. People, for example, don't trust people in government. Those of us who have worked in government and those who work in government know that the majority of people in government are not just honest, but they work hard and they go beyond the call of duty to serve humanity. But because of the few bad apples that have annoyed humanity so much, everyone gets painted with the same brush, and then we get a trust deficit. So definitely doing business the clean way with integrity pays, because you get trust. But the payment, somebody who has no integrity is going to shoot up like that. Somebody who does business with integrity, or your career with integrity, usually doesn't shoot up like a shooting star. You grow incrementally, but you grow sustainably. Yes.
Great. So I'm going to go to all the shopping centers now. And I'm sure that we've all discovered this. When you buy something and your value comes to $29.99, you give 30 Rand, they say thank you, and they walk off, so they still owe you a cent. But you come there and you bring in $29.98. They're going to say, sorry, we need another cent from you. They will not finish that transaction. Bad integrity in that case. Just following on from what you've just said now, so what measures can we put in place to integrity-proof our organizations?
Well, some of it was covered by Charissa around training. that people be trained to understand what is integrity, honesty, uprightness, rectitude, honor, ethics, righteousness, virtues, and things like that. Training. But secondly, to get people, during the training, to make people aware of the cost of integrity lapses. That everything you gain in the short term by lying, cheating, and stealing is going to be lost, but when you lose it, you lose that which you worked for too. And with lawyers, we've seen this. You worked hard to get your law degree. You got accepted into the legal profession. You worked hard. And then, many years later, that integrity lapse that you may have been involved in earlier comes back to haunt you. Sometimes these integrity lapses as a lawyer can stop you from being declared a fit and proper person. I can see my colleagues there from Ravenstein attorneys in PE. You know that, dear colleagues, that just to now be accepted. You've worked hard, you've written your bar exam, you've passed it, just to be accepted now as an advocate or as a lawyer, to earn that title, they will go into an integrity check on you. If they find that thing that you did, it's all gone just like that. But sometimes, let's say then you fool people and you get accepted as a lawyer. Comes the day you now want to be appointed as a public protector, or you want to be appointed as a judge, another integrity check is done, and gone is your...
How do you feel about that, Charissa?
So that would be training. But just one last thing is, I think though beyond training in the companies, we need to go back to teaching young people integrity. At the last workshop we were here, one of the grandmothers told a story that I usually build into my talk around ethics, where she talks about this story where a king was looking for an heir and sent 3 young people to go and plant a seed and bring back a tree and fruit. And these 3 young people were supposed to be the best and potential heirs because he didn't have a son. So they were going to be king. They all came back. 2 of them had the tree and the fruit and gave the king. And the last one came to the king and said, "Sorry, sir, I tried my best, but nothing came out of your seed." And who do you think the king appointed? Most people would say appointed the one who came with the best fruit. Well, the truth is he appointed only the last one. And the reason I appointed the last one was the test was not a test of who's going to bring the goods fast. Like companies sometimes overemphasize profit and fast profit. In this case, he wanted to know who is going to be honest. And he wanted to leave his kingdom to an honest human being. And he gave his kingdom to the young person who came with nothing.
So honesty really paid off in the end there for that person. And that's a lesson that we can all learn. Honesty pays off every time. Charissa, do you agree?
Absolutely. But
not immediately.
Not immediately.
No, it's as we said, it's not easy. It's as Charissa earlier said, that integrity is hard, but you got to work at it.
Yes.
Can I add to what Professor says about training? It's my theory that we need to include emotional intelligence as well when we're talking about integrity, because it's just a theory that I'd like to be proved. Someone with low EQ, I don't think, can have integrity. But what fascinates me, just coming back to this, we cannot have organizations saying that integrity is part of their values and there is no training. It fascinates me how you can have organizations have all these values and no one knows how to practically apply it. I'm fascinated. And it's just too often.
So then, Faisal, carry on with that. How can we get organizations to be integrity compliant across all levels?
When I looked at that question, I thought that's a fairly difficult one. But my thinking was that, firstly, that if you're looking at integrity, we know that integrity is a visceral component, so it's internal. But the aspect of ethics being the external component. The funny thing is that I just want to go through maybe as a talk show host, I've been through, I'm not sure, it's probably 600 or 700 discussions on TV in the last 15 or 20 years. And one absorbs all of that all the time. So you come away with something from your guest all the time. I've sat with people that gangsters in a room that has committed murder en masse, for example. I've sat with international oppressors, and when you sit with them and you talk to them about what their thoughts are around honesty, integrity, and stepping up to the plate, they all want to. So that means when they're alone, they're very different. And probably as a lawyer, you've seen that. But when they're en masse in a group, social psychology plays a role in all of that. So how do we make our organizations compliant? What I've done was, very briefly, I'm not going to explain the following to you because it's very summarized. I've listed 16 lines that will make your organization integrity proof, and I'm going to run through that very quickly. And some of you might think that these are fairly obvious, but I think that today's session, in my view, I don't think we can teach anyone, including myself, to have integrity. I think that we can enhance those feelings of integrity, and that's what I quickly want to do. Firstly, in the workspace, show up on time.
Yep.
I'm not going to say, Professor, I know you got a long schedule. There's a lot going on there. But these are 16 put that gets integrity surfaced inside an organization. Just understand something. You cannot integrity proof an organization if you cannot integrity proof an individual, because the organization is individuals. Number two, write things down that you have to deliver on. So you got things to deliver, write them down so that you can deliver on them. It's no point walking around saying, I'll do it. By the end of the day, you've got 50, I'll do it, and you won't do it. Trust me. Number three, keep your promises and explain, and alluding to something Professor said earlier, why you have an excuse. So when you make an excuse, I couldn't make the deadline, tough, I had many things to do. Focus on your performance. See if anything about your behavior is inconsistent. You need to sometimes sit back and ask yourself the question, is there anything inconsistent about my own behavior? And when you sit down, you might find some of that. Do not cover up bad news, even if you're government, Madam Speaker. Do not cover up bad news. Tell the truth and just move on. Professor, you alluded to this early on. Do not blame anyone for anything. Take responsibility. Be disciplined, number 9. Number 10, in your companies and organizations, review policy statements to ensure that they are consistent with your actions. Number 10, sorry, that was number 10, I'm going to number 11. I sound like Charissa now. Number 11, control the rate of change in your organization and the implementation of policy. Don't enforce things on people and expect them to fall in line. Control that rate of change so that people can be compliant. Maintain an open door policy. That goes either way. If people know they can speak to you, then people will be open to speaking to you. Work through channels rather than around channels when you are reporting. Stick to relationships that you're in for the long haul. Don't talk about short-term relationships. 15, admit your mistakes. And 16, insist on honesty from people that you're dealing with. So when you talk to them, insist on honesty. And the last one is an example that comes from myself. And I don't know, it's Parliament, can I say this? But there are 2 ways when we think about sleeping your way to the top. Okay? So a lot of people of you would think about.
So you're saying there are ways to sleep your way to the top?
Yeah, there are, but I'm not. There's no SNVL sign on the stage, so I'm not going to go your route at Lee. I'm going to talk about the other way, and that is that I want to just. All of us are employees, even me as the CEO at the channel. I'm an employee of the board, and many other people, and I'm an employee of the viewers. They employ me to do what we do. So here's the thing. For example, when I say sleeping your way to the top, it's related to our time. When you're sleeping at your desk and you're thinking you're going to get that promotion, you're stealing company time. Professor mentioned it early on. You walk off to a shop and you pay 10 Rand for 2 kilos of potatoes, and if they give you 1 kilo for 10 Rand, you're going to make a noise. Your employee, the public, the public that you serve feel the same way. Don't sleep in Parliament. Sorry, I needed to say that in Parliament.
No, but
Sorry.
it's true. It's true. Just Prof wanted to say something quickly.
Yeah, two things about integrity proofing. The one is the behavior of the leadership. There's a story that is told about a father who had to pick up a child who had been arrested and for petty theft. And I think the child had stolen pencils and things like pens from a local shop. And the father went to pick him up from jail. And when he arrived, he said to the son, "Son, why would you steal these things? I would have just taken them from my company and given them to you." So it really is. But the message there is, don't steal, let me steal. So we have to be careful about that. But the second one is, how do we deal with failure? And this is where I think the Auditor General, I would like, now that I'm outside government and I have more time, to deal with the Auditor General. Whenever people make mistakes in government, there's so much noise around it, and sometimes we don't distinguish between small maladministration that is related to human error and corruption. And we punish people. What then people do in government, they hide mistakes. Because nobody wants to lose their job for the smallest thing. But when they hide the mistake, it gets bigger and bigger. So we just have to reform the way we deal with failure and allow people. I mean, the story I told about me and my PA Karen, you've got to encourage that culture where somebody says, this is what I was supposed to do for a client, but something went wrong, and that should be acceptable, and we should thank them for being honest, because now we don't have to cover up and we don't have to be in bad terms with the client.
I like that buzz phrase that you used, reform the way we'll deal with failure. Good phrase to remember. Charissa?
Yes, I didn't know this.
I didn't.
I'm stolen something from Professor, so I can't say credit. You spoke about, I have to be honest, you spoke last time about the most valuable player. If someone does do something with integrity, let's praise them, let's affirm them, let's pat them on the back. MVP was your last, yes.
We do that at Tuma. We always have an MVP for an event.
And it means a lot to the person and the company, really, on a bigger level. Peggy Johnson, who's a businesswoman, said a lot of companies have nice-sounding cultural values like integrity, respect, and excellence, but if those values don't map to specific behaviors, then they quickly get lost. Instead, she says, we see what's called a halo effect, where leaders tend to overvalue certain attributes and undervalue others, what we've just been speaking about now. So, Faisal, there's been a lot of discussion around integrity ambassadors in the workplace. Are there pros and cons to having integrity departments in organizations? And Prof, you can weigh in on this one as well.
I personally think that the pros, in my view, is that it heightens the sense of having integrity all the time. So if you have an integrity ambassador around, you're reminded that you should have some integrity. It enlightens that aspect in your thinking, in my view. However, one of the negatives that I think is that if we invest our heart and soul into this individual that we see to be an integrity ambassador, and that integrity ambassador tomorrow runs off with somebody in the company having an affair or something, or for example stealing some company funds, but you invested your hope in that, I think that could allow for an internal questioning as to what was the purpose of that guy, and if he's done that, then I should do the same. So I think as much as you invest in the integrity ambassador, they can also bench up this expectability, and if that gets knocked, you might get knocked. That's just my opinion.
Prof, anything would you like to add to that? The sort of value of having ambassadors of integrity in workplaces.
Well, I agree with Faisal. It has pros and cons, but I do think that if you are going to go for the route of integrity ambassadors, they should be highly trained, because people don't just do what we say, they do what we do. If you have appointed people and you said these are integrity ambassadors, people will look at them as the epitome of integrity. And when they do things that are wrong, it may demoralize others to say these ones are called integrity ambassadors, but they do wrong things. And I also wouldn't want to see the integrity ambassadors hiding their mistakes because they want to look like the people of integrity. Just whilst I have the platform, often companies hide wrongdoing because of what they call brand integrity, where you are known as a company that does no wrong, and when something that is going to taint your brand happens, some companies go then for a cover-up. And that's a mistake. The one company that doesn't do that in terms of maintaining its brand integrity is Pick n Pay. When a scandal breaks that says that there was an integrity lapse, they promised this quality of things, but the people got this quality of things. Pick n Pay, at least particularly when it was still under the original owner, Raymond Ackerman, he was one brand person who would go out and say, this is what we promised, this is what we stood for, but we made a mistake. We delivered at a level lower than what we promised, and we're going to fix it. Others just try to keep the charade that, you know, this is who we are. As a public protector, we used to actually also acknowledge when things went wrong, we said, this is the standard we promised. There's a discrepancy between what we delivered and what we promised, and we're sorry.
You know, that ties in very nicely to what you said earlier when I asked you about how does integrity impact on profitability, and I see in a case like Pick n Pay being filled with integrity all the time, they are still doing very well because they conduct themselves with the needed integrity. Faisal, now let's go to Charissa. Charissa, do you think that there should be firm policies, procedures and pledges in organizations around integrity?
Yes, but the sad thing is we haven't written them yet, and that's something that we really need to do, that people can volunteer to take a pledge to have integrity and to be responsible. But we don't have policies and procedures, and it's a huge area that we need to put into place as far as I'm concerned. How they will look like and what will they be, I'm not in the law faculty, but I'd love some assistance with that, and I think if people feel that's valuable, that's a place to start.
And would you agree, Faisal?
I agree with Charissa. At the same time, I just want to break that quickly down, thinking that your policies and procedures for me are very linked to the ethics side, and perhaps your pledges are on the integrity side, so that if you get people to pledge, you can hold them to the pledge, but how do you hold them to integrity when that's supposed to somehow be a visceral behavioral trait instead?
It's a difficult.
Yeah, it's a difficult one.
I wanted to also say that in most companies, your integrity pledge is the same pledge as your ethics pledge. For example, at Stellenbosch University, when the students arrived this year, Nicholas Smith, the dean, gave them a new constitution that had a pledge at the beginning of it that talked about me as a citizen of South Africa, recognize the injustices of the past, blah, 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 and just pledge what kind of citizen are you going to be. And a lot of it had to do with integrity, the pursuit of social justice, etc., and then you sign it. But I do agree with my colleagues that the pledge usually is not something that is going to be enforced in some cases, but it's something that is linked to your ethical conduct, because how do we get to know you have integrity? It is when you behave ethically. I also do want to say, slightly different from my colleagues, is that ethical conduct is not only that which is in your code of conduct. And I just want to say that to people because they get caught up in places where you are held guilty of unethical conduct, and it wasn't in the code. Ethical conduct is broader than what is in the code of conduct. I mean, if you look at the IEC case again that we dealt with, because there are broader rights, there are broader issues of what right and wrong than your ethical code, because your code might just be too narrow because you wanted to stick to a lower threshold for yourselves. So it doesn't make what you do right if it's wrong in the broader sense of what is expected of human beings and what is expected of companies. For example, if your code of conduct says nothing about theft, it doesn't mean that theft is unethical.
Precisely,
if the code of conduct says nothing about lying, It doesn't mean you can lie, but if you do lie, we will consider it to be unethical. For example, code of conduct will not say don't cheat your customers by giving them bread that is 900 grams instead of 1 kg. It would not say that, but it would be unethical to do that. Yes.
Yeah. Let's go to another topic now completely, and Prof, I'm going to stay with you. And with the advent of social media, it's far more evident now. What measures do you think can be put in place to identify and prevent bullying in the workplace?
Do you want me to?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Well, firstly, we have to define bullying, and we have to, in your code of conduct in the company, you have to define bullying and include it in your code of conduct.
Okay. Faisal, would you like to weigh in on that one as well?
Because bullying is unethical, and they say violence is the language of the disempowered, and bullying is a form of violence. It has to do with lack of confidence as a leader, because if you are confident, you're not going to bully anybody.
And I think that is so true. It's often lack of confidence in the leader, not the work person. Yeah.
Exactly.
Any comments, Faisal?
I agree with Professor Thuli. I also think that I like looking at bullying from a different perspective. And I sometimes feel that if I take bullying into the playground at school, for example, I sometimes wonder if it is the victim that is being bullied or if it is the bully that needs the attention and the reparation internally.
No,
so
true.
Maybe sometimes we need to look the other way and say, is the problem with the victim in this case or the person? Is the causative behavior that leads to that? So maybe we are looking at a bigger problem when you see evidence of bullying instead. So sorry, I'm just putting a different spin on that.
No, but
No,
he's
true.
right.
It's true. He's right.
Faisal is right. Is that okay? Bullying, you can't end it by simply criminalizing it or making it a disciplinary issue. You have to look at the social and psychological causes of bullying. There's a story in that book. Chicken Soup for the Soul, I think. There's a story about bullying, about the little kid who was bullying other kids, and but I read it like years ago. But basically, when on discovering why was this child bullying, it turned out that his own home situation was a terrible home situation, and bullying was a way of the child trying to make sense of his life and making himself relevant, making himself feel better about himself. So yes, part of the way of ending bullying is dealing with the trauma and the causal factor of the bullying.
And I think this happens to a lot.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, you were saying?
Now I'm saying part of the way you can end bullying is healing the bullying.
Sorry, I just want to add on one line of that.
Yes.
I know that Charissa will agree with this from a mental health practitioner's point of view, and that is that we never try to understand what people do, but why they do it.
Yes.
And if you understand why more, then you would understand more.
We've also got to understand the person that's being bullied, it's been known to link to low self-esteem and more prone to illnesses, statistics tell us. And it's happening not only at school level, it's happening at university level. A colleague asked me to throw this in. And I come back to just basic and being naive. It's not right to bully. So if one was doing the right thing and we were teaching children that, they wouldn't be doing that to other children. End of story.
Yes, but it also happens in the workplace as well. In managing people, when we're struggling with our leadership style, bullying might seem to be the easy thing, where you just say, do this, don't do that, and threaten people, etc. It happens. And often people think that bullying gives you better results, whereas it actually destroys the self-esteem of the people you are managing, and it leads to less productivity.
Prof, I'm going to stay with you and give you quite a loaded question.
Yes.
Linked to bullying, I would suppose. And how do relations of power and powerlessness affect integrity? And how is an understanding of power necessary to reach greater levels of integrity? So there's the power and powerlessness paradigm. And how would we, if we understood power, how would that help us to reach greater levels of integrity?
Well, I then go back to the people who are celebrating Nelson Mandela and Albertina Sisulu. The starting point is to understand and accept that you are in a position of power and privilege, which usually is by virtue of the position you've been placed in. We could be friends right now. The minute one of us gets appointed as the Speaker of Parliament or somebody gets appointed as President, there's an automatic psychological power shift between us. And the important thing, though, is that the one who has power has to understand that you have power, because if you don't understand your power, you're like a child who's carrying a gun. And you're going to use it irresponsibly and hatefully. But having said that, people who have power often are victims themselves if they haven't healed. What Faisal spoke about is that, so you could be having that enormous power, but you still feel you're the victim of the people you work with, like when they don't arrive on time, like you said, or when they don't do what they're supposed to do, you react like a victim. And what they say, violence is the language of the disempowered. So you can have power but disempowered. And when you feel disempowered, that's when you use that power, you leverage that power to get things done or to impose revenge on people.
And it's amazing how very simply it all boils down to that one phrase we've been using all day: just do the right thing at the right time. Just do the right thing, whether you're in power, or you think you have power, or you don't have power. Just do the right thing that's required of you.
But you still need self-consciousness.
Absolutely,
well, self-awareness. What Charissa said earlier, the importance of self-awareness is that we're talking about bullying, and you're saying it's wrong, but you might just be bullying someone whilst you don't recognize yourself as a bully. Often when we go to workshops, and I've seen that, is that we're always looking at who can learn something from this. As I grew older, I stopped doing that. I always looked at me first and say, what have I learned today? And what can I change in my life? Instead of thinking about who do I work with, who's my friend, who should have been at that workshop, who needs to change, I have to look at how can I change, and self-awareness. And Charissa mentioned the question of emotional intelligence. Sometimes bullying comes from lack of emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence is not something, it's not an incident, it's a lifetime. It's something I used to teach about, and some days you are more intelligent than others. And it really is about, a lot of it is about managing the gap between the trigger and your response. Because if you are emotionally intelligent, all of your interactions with humanity should be self-driven, purpose-driven by you, and self-anchored. But often it's a trigger, somebody presses a button, and it's like this. I remember when I had a moment in Parliament, the day they called me Thuli walks on water, and that was the first and the last time I raised my voice in Parliament. And Pravin Gordon asked me, were you hungry on that day? And true, I hadn't slept well and I was hungry. Because, okay, some of it has to do self-awareness, self-management, self-consciousness. Whatever you do, this person has said this, process it before you respond. Because if you have processed it, you will respond, you won't react. It's not going to ping pong. But if you haven't eaten, the chemical imbalance in your body diminishes your ability to manage the gap between the trigger and your response.
So it's all about recognizing the triggers sometimes.
Yes.
You want to say something?
Just on a lighter note, but it's not such a lighter note. I spoke about Oscar Pistorius when they asked me, because we're talking about EQ, and what you were saying is loss of impulse control. Yes. And we were having that whole thing, whether it's fight or flight, and did you lose that impulse? So just interesting. So it not only alludes to that, but it's to murder and to everything else.
Absolutely,
when you lose that impulse and we get angry.
Faisal, would you say there's a link between gender inequality and unethical behavior?
Okay, so when I looked at that question, this matter of gender inequality and unethical behavior is such huge terms in my view. But so I did a little exercise this morning where I broke those two issues down just quickly into definition so that I could marry the two. But then I didn't realize they were married, but I'll explain to you now. Okay, so gender inequality, what do we refer to that? And Professor, I'm really worried speaking in front of you about these things when you're the chair of social justice, but I'm going to attempt. So therefore I'm reading it instead from the dictionary. It says, gender inequality is the idea and situation that women and men are not equal. It refers to unequal treatment, so that's gender inequality. Unethical behavior is actions and behavior that falls outside proper morality and behavior that's expected in society. So now, if you're asking the question if it's linked, I don't think it's linked. I must say that I would want to rephrase that and say that gender inequality is unethical behavior. And the one is of each other instead of having a link. The one is of each other, if you try and get what I'm trying to say there. I know I just want to mention one thing that's totally aside of that when it comes to inequality, and this got nothing to do with inequality, but just taking one step back, I see the Humane Trust is here, and they're dealing with animal abuse, and we've been dealing with that cattle being shoved on the ships there to Mauritius. We've been dealing with that story last week on TV, and I just want to bring that quickly into context, Adley, for a moment, and say that if we rewind the tape and we look at bullying, unethical behavior, and all of that, do we need to go back to the playground perhaps and look at our behavior with animals and all of that and say, is this a progressive continuum of abuses? When we have no integrity, did it start on that level? Do we squash every bug that come in our way? Did it start there? Did Jeffrey Dahmer not cut up all these animals and then proceed to cutting up human beings? These are just questions that I have when we talk about integrity.
Right, I'm going to ask one final question, and this is posed to all of us here on the panel, and then we're going to go to the audience for their Q&A. So, final question I want to ask is, what are we doing, or what can we personally do to raise the levels of integrity in the world? Charissa, can we start with you?
It starts with ourselves, and I'd love to see a ripple effect. I'd love to see integrity come back, and as Professor says, being made sexy, being made current, being spoken about, and it's very contagious. When we throw the word around, it has huge implications. So let's start talking about it, let's start having conversations, let's start having dialogues, let's start having more talks, let's start up training, ASAP, and not only for South Africa, I'm talking international. Let's do the right thing, and let's start do the right thing in our campaigns, and let's go universal with it. If we do the right thing, there'd be less abuse and less everything on every level.
Good answer, and a very doable answer. Faisal, your reply?
So I think personally, I've perhaps looked at that on two different spectrums. One is something that Professor alluded to in her opening remarks, and she said surrounding yourself with the right people. The people today, for me, Sharna Fernandez, the Speaker, someone in Parliament that is pushing the line of integrity, surrounding yourself with I'm sitting here Saturday afternoon with 100 of you. The rest of the 55 million South Africans are sitting at the beach while we're discussing integrity. So I think it is about putting yourself in the right circle. Charissa Bloomberg, someone that stands behind integrity and is trying to empower through that, and Professor, that's the embodiment of integrity. So surrounding yourself with the right people, but also for me, I try not to make the mistake of only surrounding myself with people with integrity, and that might sound strange, Professor, and that is because I sometimes feel that if we do that, we might marginalize people that want to bench up in their lives, and we might be pushing them out. Dr. Phil said on one of his shows, he said that when people warn you against other people, then tell them that I'm not warned against person X, Y, and Z. I trust myself enough not to go the route that person has gone. Yeah. And I can perhaps use that space to empower the person that needs integrity. So I think it's spending time consciously in sessions like this to raise a level of awareness around integrity.
True, absolutely true. Prof, I'm going to leave the last words with you.
Well, thank you. I think to raise the integrity quotient in the entire world, those of us who believe in integrity should walk the talk. We should be the change we want to see in the world. And when we see opportunities to make a difference in others, let's do so. But just here's the deal, though. It often doesn't work to tell people you have no integrity. To throw stones at people on the other side, it doesn't work. Perhaps let's make sure that we find models of integrity and we uphold them. I know, for example, that there's an organization that has tried, although it's low profile in South Africa, but the initiative started in India. They have a project called Find Your Integrity Idol. They introduced it in South Africa, but it didn't really take much ground. But let organizations do that and have integrity idols in the organization, have integrity idols among politicians, because if everyone just believes that, politics is about lying, cheating, and
Sleeping.
stealing, then people think, okay, we're in good company, but we know that the majority of politicians from time immemorial have been just honest, upright human beings who want to serve humanity the best way they can.
I think that sums it up beautifully. How do you serve humanity in the very best way? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Let's give our panel a big round of applause. So they have ingested and digested and spoken to you about integrity and their views on integrity, and we assume from nobody having left before that you all listened with great intent. So now the floor is open to you, so now you can pose some questions, and we've got runners over there. Wait till the microphone comes to you. But as we said before, please respect our wish for no politics and no religion. It's an open platform about integrity.
Drums outside.
Thank you, yes. Where's our people with the microphones? Let's start over here. And that gentleman over there.
Thank you, Program Director. My name is Tozizo Bufanda. I am the Executive Director of A Greener World South Africa. I'm saying South Africa because there's a global one who's based in the US. I want to take a slightly, it's not really a question, it's a comment. I want to take a slight different sort of angle and say that we will always have integrity lapses as people, because Webster Dictionary describes it as a state of completeness or a state of being whole. And I don't think we'll ever reach that state, mainly because of lack of knowledge. And Faisal made an example of a cattle sent to Mauritius. I work in that space. And if you are not eating free-range eggs, for example, or free-range grass-fed beef, and you are eating meat that is coming from a cruel system, if you do it whilst knowing,
Then you have no
where's your integrity? But if you don't know, it might be an integrity lapse. It's just a comment. Lack of knowledge might sort of push us
Absolutely,
to have those lapses always.
Good food for thought, that pardon the pun there. Good food for thought. The gentleman at the back there.
Thank you. Thanks, Hadley. It's René Skomon. I'm a member of the CRL, the CRL Rights Commission, Culture, Religion and Language. And I just want to add my voice to the speaker for bringing this together today. I think I go to an awful lot of events in my capacity in the Commission, and this is my 6th Mandela event this very week. But really it has been a brilliant afternoon, and I think the quality of what the responses has been utterly amazing. So from my side, I just want to flag that and thank for that. Charissa just said something about honesty, and as having been in Parliament for a long time myself, there was a little joke I like to say, yes, that man is an honest politician. He's a contradiction in terms. Now, when you think about that, it's not true necessarily, and as the professor pointed out, there are a lot of honest politicians around, not all equally visible at any given moment, but they're quite a good number. I just wanted to lastly say to Prof, she's been referred to, that we are talking about the integrity voice. She said we must listen to that. But the fact of the matter is, I think she is the voice of integrity in this country, and we must treasure that and support her and thank her for that and urge her to carry on, continue the struggle.
Ladies and gentlemen, we don't have much time for Q&A, so I'm going to ask you to keep the questions incredibly short, and we're going to, but really, really short, because I'm going to cut. If it's a short, we'll get the drummers going. The lady in the front with the red scarf here?
Faisal's mom.
Faisal's mom, okay.
That's nepotism, and that's part of an integrity lapse.
While she's deciding, let's get somebody at the back there. The lady, where's the microphone for the ladies there? The person right there with you? Yeah?
Hi, my name is Caleb Kay. I'm currently a UCT student studying politics, philosophy, and economics. I just want to say I'm not so good with speaking out of people, so I'll try my best. So I want to take this conversation a bit slightly different approach. So we spoke about gender equality, but I want to specifically focus on sexual orientation equality. And so I feel that as a country, our state is supposed to protect and promote the Constitution, but I feel that in certain instances we don't. And you spoke earlier about the people who we deal with, who we surround ourselves with, we are basically like them. And I feel like as South Africa, we have dealt with certain countries who criminalize homosexuality. And I just wanted to know, and also, and also in 2016, I think it's when South Africa abstained from an LGBT vote at the United Nations, which I think is an integrity lapse. So I just wanted to know, what do you make of that? And do you think that as South Africa, in order to promote and protect our Constitution, that we should have a stronger stance against countries who criminalize homosexuality, specifically for residents in South Africa, so that we can start having faith in our state again? Thank you.
Right. Prof, would you give a short answer on that one?
Yes, well, thank you. On the question of integrity at the level of country policy, I do agree with you that whatever we say in multilateral structures has to be consistent with what we claim to stand for. And our Constitution, until we've changed it, stands for respecting the humanity of everyone, regardless of diversity, and that diversity includes gender, race, religion, etc., and sexual orientation. I think from an integrity point of view, the approach for me, for our country, should be do no harm. And in terms of monitoring other people's sexual behavior, when it has nothing to do with doing no harm, that has, in our country, we've done well. But all we need to do is that when we go to the AU, we should speak the language we speak here. When we go to the UN, we should speak the language because the moment you say something different elsewhere, there's no integrity. If we go back to Faisal's point about wholeness. Wholeness means you're one person, you are authentic, and your message is the same wherever you go.
Right, we've got time for about 3 questions. I'm going to go to this lady in the front here.
She would like Faisal to read the question.
My mom just sent me a message because she said,
let's do the, yeah, what's the question?
She just sent a note to say that honesty, there's an old saying, but that comes from the older people, is the best policy and should be in practice. But, Mommy, honestly, I almost didn't read your handwriting.
Right, your question, ma'am?
Thank you very much. My name is Shirley Zinn, and I serve as a non-executive director on a few boards. And I want to thank the speaker today for creating this platform for the dialogue, and the panelists for so openly sharing and inspiring us. And as the great Nelson Mandela said, great peacemakers are people of integrity, honesty, and humility. So my question today really is around how do we increase moral fortitude, integrity, ethical conduct, and this requires deliberate effort, and particularly from board members that are serving in very, very senior positions in large organizations in our country. How do we ensure that there's a link between integrity, accountability, and consequence?
I'm going to throw that one to Charissa for a short answer. Okay.
I would prefer Professor looking at it.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Zinn. Yes. But before I go to you, I do want to go to Faisal's mom, and that's Miss
Sayed.
Miss Sayed. honesty is the best policy, and that's the essence of integrity. Is honesty is the best policy, and the stories that I told about being dishonest and lying so that you can get a benefit now are good stories about failure of honesty, because if you lie and get a benefit now that you don't deserve, downstream you are going to be punished, and the punishment is going to be harsher. You're going to pay more if you pay later. So thank you, Mama, for that demand. Regarding the suggestion was saying that great peacemakers are people of integrity. And the need to make sure that we bring that into boards. I'm glad, because none of us spoke about board members. We do need to bring to that, because again, it's need to greed. We board members often feel that the secretariat are the people who determine board packs, and then it becomes a question of, in Zulu we have a term, ikote kotai. God, how do I bring that into English? It's where you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Where the executive does wrong things and then the board looks the other way, because then if you look at parastatals, for example, then the executive just extends the number of board meetings. So that's a conflict of interest. Okay, they look the other way if you are permanently having meetings because you get paid a particular amount for meetings and you get your own privileges. And so I think the issue there is, again, training. The IOD should bring a higher level of integrity training within ethics. That at the end of the day, ethical conduct is not going to be possible if there's no personal integrity, but also to teach people about the delayed cost of integrity lapses, that you can get away with it for a long, long time, but when it finally catches up with you, you lose everything. And I wanted to also say, what I didn't touch is what you lose inside. Yeah. There's so many people who do things, because there's a question of integrity broadly as people understand it, but the way I've lived my life is, the most important thing has always been about being in integrity with myself. Because when you are not in integrity with yourself, you become at odds with yourself. So people, when you're screaming and you're kicking the cat, it may have nothing to do with you being a bad person. It may have to do with the fact that you're angry at yourself for doing wrong things, and you start drinking, you start buying those Gucci shoes that you can't afford because you're just trying to pacify yourself. The reality is that there's a war inside yourself because of these integrity lapses.
Right, Oprah would have said, you got a question, you got a question, you got a question, but I don't have the time, so I got two more, the lady over there, and then the lady in the back there. That will be the only questions. The good thing about all these questions and hands raised, it means that you're all thinking beings, which is fantastic. So ma'am, quick question.
Thank you. I'm Louise from the Merwe. I edit a magazine called Animal Voice. I've written it down. I'm not the best of speakers. We feel tremendous.
Keep the mic to your mouth.
We feel tremendously privileged to be here. We give special thanks to Faisal. We as humans tend to think that we must get it right for ourselves as humans before we can turn our attention to them being the animals. We treat animals, we need to understand that the way we treat animals is who we are as individuals, as nations, as the human race. The children of our land need to learn the 5 freedoms for animals as part of life orientation. It is fundamental to who they will grow up to be. And we are doing this, and we would love some support. We're getting all this emotional. We're going to put it in Animal Voice. Thank you.
Good, thank you, ma'am. Final question, ma'am, over there, yes?
Thank you very much. My name is Griselda Groepen, survivor leader and international speaking when it comes to human trafficking. It's such a privilege to be...
Sorry, just repeat it when it comes to that word.
Human trafficking.
Human trafficking, okay, right.
And the author of the book called Exit. My dream is to be a lawyer, and I'm so privileged to sit amongst the most South African, I love you Pope lawyer. And yeah. And I would like to ask a question when it comes to justice. The oppression of women has become forcefully. Women are being trafficked to be prostitutes into sex slavery. There are strategies and ways that we as UN women and activists are going through it right now. And I'm just asking, as a woman, and that you've gone through so many men leaders, having to still stand and fight to say, me as a woman, my integrity and my knowledge to bring to society and the country is still important. But as a survivor, I still go through so many conferences and meetings around the world where I see why women are being trafficked to be prostitutes. And now it's being normalized from prostitution to work. Is that the kind of 20, 30 years you as a lawyer and a woman and a leader and a mentor to me from far has fought for a black woman and an African woman and a South African woman and a Kailicha woman and a Saitsi woman? The integrity of saying for women to get a better job is to be a prostitute these days. Is that the kind of integrity are we fighting for as women? Because wherever I've traveled, we've just come from Geneva, the Human Rights Council, and it was shock for leaders to see a survivor woman coming from prostitution saying, I am a survivor of sex slavery and this is an oppression to women's dignity and integrity. What do you think about it? And some guidelines, and I would like to declare, can you mentor me from now on? But thank you very much, it's a privilege.
Thank you for that final question, which really needs to be answered. Who would like to take that one?
I think that's for Prof.
Take Louise's one.
All right. Well, thank you. Mentorship, I'll give you my number. It will be up to you when to liaise with me on whatever issues you want. But thank you for what you've said. The first question was the animal voice that says, if we're cruel to animals, we're suggesting the truth is we have no integrity. And I think that's true. If we say we stand for justice, it should be justice for all. The moment we cherry pick, we have a problem, because as long as justice is just us, there'll always be somebody that we think deserves to be treated badly. And I think that's what the author of a book called Ishmael teaches us about. If we're cruel to animals, it becomes easier to be cruel to human beings, because you're always finding a weak person to press. On the question of women trafficking and prostitution, just the short answer is, when it comes to integrity from our side as a country, we have to stick to our constitution, which is human rights for all. The way we want to deal with the issue of sex work has to resonate with our belief that everyone has human rights, regardless of where the people are. And what often concerns me is we react to the issues of prostitution or sex work from a religious point of view. It's wrong, and I may well think it's wrong, you may well think it's wrong, but at the end of the day, we have to look at how do we protect the human beings that are involved. And when we pass laws, when we enforce laws, do we enforce them in a manner that ensures that the humanity of the people, particularly the women concerned, is protected and their dignity is protected, given the way. But what you have said that people may not be aware of, the International Women's Judges has written a lot of papers around something that is called white-collar prostitution.
Just repeat that.
White-collar prostitution. It is a form of corruption where instead of asking for a bribe, when it's a woman, you ask for sexual favors. Whether a person is tendering or a person is looking for a job. It's the simpler word is sexual harassment, but a lot of people have increasingly found themselves having to enter into relationships they don't want because they feel that's the only way that they can be recognized as competent. And these people will be competent. It's the same way as a company paying a bribe when it knows that it was the best company. And then I think what she's saying is that often women have found themselves in that. There are those that are trafficked. There are those who enter sort of voluntarily, but it's not voluntary because it seemed to be the only way. You know the case in UNISA, for example, the woman in UNISA who was subjected or allegedly subjected to sexual harassment by a company executive, and at the end reported it, but allegedly nothing was done. And in a situation like that, you have to decide between keeping your job and doing something. In her case, she did something. I must tell you that she lost her job. Currently, she's unemployed. She's been kicked out of her flat, and she's Zimbabwean, meaning she could only be in this country with a with a permit, and that permit is now at stake. So those are situations whereby you are going to find yourself in a situation of, do I comply and just keep quiet and grin and bear it, or do I kick and scream and then end up jobless and end up homeless, as she has done? And maybe this is just to end to say there's a lot of goodness in our country. Part of that goodness is reflected in the fact that our Speaker Fernandez has brought us together here, and we all answer to the call because all of us want to connect our lives. There's a lot of good things that are being done to make sure that we take this country to higher ground, and that the next chapter of South Africa's democracy and of the history of the world is a better one. Mandela and Albertina Sisulu and their contemporaries, including Helen Zille and Helen Zille and many other people, those who walked before us did the best they could, and whenever they knew better, they did better. It's for us now to keep doing better, and when we know better, we should do better. Thank you.
Wow, ladies and gentlemen, you've all been amazing. Our panel has been amazing. Let's give them a really, really big round of applause. Really been amazing. And keep that rolling for yourselves. You've been an amazing audience, really a great audience. And then before I call Speaker Fernandez up just to thank you all for being here, just a few words from me. Before you assume, learn the facts. Before you judge, understand why. And before you hurt someone, feel. And before you speak, think. Speaker Fernandez, up to you. Let's see.
Wow, what can I say? It's been an amazing afternoon. You heard the call to prayer. You heard the drummers at the guest house across the way entertaining, I think, youngsters from many other countries around the world. And Cape Town is diverse. But I was sitting there and reflecting on a Saturday afternoon, here we are talking about integrity. And I came to the realization that you all are indeed special people to have come out on the Saturday afternoon. So I need to say thank you to each and every one of you who made this event possible today. Can we give ourselves a round of applause? One normally has a prepared script, but I'm just going to wing this one and speak from my heart, because to me, it's about our humanity. And I think if we lose integrity, we start to lose our humanity. And to me, integrity is about doing the right thing when no one's watching. I think if we follow that little truism, when no one's watching, we know we're going to be okay. But too often, and I like to talk about the little boy or the youngster who had to be picked up, how often do you take a pencil or an eraser or a stapler from work because the children need it at home? You might take it home, but then you don't bring it back the next day. I think of my grandson who loves drinking milk out of the fridge. He says, "Nanny, can I have some milk, please?" Now, I always tell him, drink the milk out of the glass. But you know, he does that thing behind the fridge door, and then he's got a milk stash. So now, should I set him straight there and then? Because I think if we want to hand the baton of integrity, we actually have to live our purpose. We have to live an authentic life at a higher level of consciousness, that you realize before you hurt someone else, you actually think what your words and actions are going to do or hurt, how they will harm or build an individual. So here we are today. We've just about started, we've just taken off the first layer of the onion. And I think there are so many conversations that still need to be had. I'm actually working very closely with the Dula Omar Institute and Lawyers for Human Rights around a sexual harassment policy. And whilst we've been discussing that over the last few months, the whole issue of integrity again comes out. Often in positions of power, people are very scared to raise their voices because they fear that they might lose their jobs, their livelihoods. So it's a difficult place to be. And I watched, was it ENCA last night, where I listened to the story of the whistleblower from ESCOM. She's now lost a job. She's officially been dismissed for surfacing something that we would not have known about. So there is a price to pay for living a life of integrity. But I think the more we can work on this, what I call a moral regeneration, because it does seem as if as a country we are slipping, we are on a slippery slope, we are losing our moral compass, and we are quite happy to tell the little white lies in an effort to just get to, I don't even think it's about paying it forward, in an effort to get ahead. And then I liked what Prof said, it comes back and it bites you. It catches up with you. It's the law of the universe. It's called karma. 99%, 99 times you'll get it right. That 100th time it will get to you. So I trust that you've enjoyed this very first conversation. I would have liked it to have been different. We could have had some round tables. We could have had participation at tables. We could have got more input from the participants. But I think this is just the first of many. And my appeal to everyone in this room today, take this integrity conversation away with you. Have a little workshop at your office, at your place of work, at your institution. And I think the more we start making integrity fashionable again, the easier it will be for us to relate to each other. You know, I need to put my head down at night and know that I can sleep safely, that I've not done anyone wrong during the day. And it's that level of almost peace that you have when you can live with yourself and you can look your colleague in the eye and you can say, you know what, we've got through this day, we've done well. But we do need role models. I think our children do need role models. Bullying is becoming not only an issue in the playground, you see bullying in the workplace, you see bullying in society, and sadly, with social media, it just goes viral. And I just wish positive behaviors could go viral like negative behaviors go viral. Have you noticed on Facebook, Twitter, social media, whatever it might be, it's like bad news sells. And the good news stories just get sort of left there and no one really picks up on the good news stories. So I think we need to be ambassadors of hope. I do believe in this beautiful country of ours. I think 24 years into democracy, we still have some way to go to get there, but it requires committed citizens who are willing to take up their role actively and say, we have a voice, we're going to use it to make our province and our country a better place. And I would like to thank you today for your commitment to coming out here. Prof, to you, you're a very, very busy woman, and I tell you, it was an absolute coup to get Prof on a Saturday afternoon in the manner in which we did. But I must say to Charissa, she was quite instrumental in pulling off this one. Faisal, I met him early in the week. We did a little video show on integrity, and it was quite interesting, the comments from the viewers, because people say, how do you start having an integrity conversation with members of parliament? But I'd like to say, not all members of parliament are thugs and thieves or corrupt. There are many good ones. In fact, I believe there are more good MPs than bad MPs, but the story, it's the bad story that sells. So I really want to thank you. I want to say to my panel, this is just my second engagement with you. I am going to be walking a road with them in my personal capacity as well as that of speaker, but I do hope we see the integrity lapses, and when they happen, that we actually own them. Because when you own that error, you can pick yourself up and you can carry on. When you can't own the error, that's when you need to cover up, and then it starts snowballing, and eventually we can't forget, or we can't can't remember what the original lie was. And you know, we must be very mindful with our children, in the classrooms, in our homes, wherever they are, because sometimes you tell the children, someone comes to your door and you say, oh, just tell them I'm not home. That causes conflict for their poor child, knowing my mother's upstairs and I'm saying, you know, she's not home. I was actually thinking about that. I'm very bad. I'm 5 minutes away, and I'm actually not 5 minutes away. So now I'm going to think about that. I'm going to say, I'm 15 minutes away. Please just bear with me. But it just made me reflect on the little lapses in my life that I didn't think was real, but if I didn't call myself to order, they could possibly become worse. Ladies, gentlemen, colleagues, distinguished guests, it's been an absolute privilege. I'm completely overwhelmed at the fact that you came out here. See, Ivy smiling at me there. We will start this conversation. We've started it, and it is in my nature to continue something I start. It might not be in the same format the next time, but I do want to thank you. And I believe that when you leave here, you are all going to be integrity ambassadors. Well, the fact that you've arrived indicate that you place a high price and premium on integrity, because without integrity, we are absolutely nothing. I thank you. Just a small gesture of thanks. I'd like to say thank you so much to you for being here today.
Thank you
it's
for
a
the
little
privilege.
gesture from us at Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you for the privilege.
Charissa, a little gift from Parliament.
Thank you so much.
On behalf of the members and the staff. Thank you,
thank you for this today. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. It's a koi pot. Thank you so much. I appreciate your participation here today. Thank you very much. Oh, then Hadley. There we go, Hadley.
Thank you
so much. Ladies and gentlemen, there'll be an opportunity to have some light refreshments, and I also think use the time to take some pics and to network with each other, and hopefully we'll see each other again sometime soon. Thank you.